Elijah, similarly, is going to function as the conscience of King Ahab in 1 Kings 21. There you have a story of a vineyard. The king covets this particular vineyard of a particular man. So the king's wife, Jezebel, falsely accuses the man of blasphemy. That is a capital crime, and the man is stoned to death, even though these are trumped-up charges, and his property is transferred to the crown. Shortly after that, Elijah appears, and he pronounces doom upon Ahab and his descendants for this terrible deed. Ahab admits the sin, he repents, and so his punishment is delayed, but as we've seen, he is later killed in battle at Ramoth Gilead. So in these stories, we see the prophets functioning as troublers of Israel, certainly from the royal point of view. And their relationships with the royal house, these relationships are quite adversarial. So we're ready to move into what we call the period of classical prophecy and the literary prophets. And that's a period that begins with two prophets, Amos and Hosea, who we'll be talking about next time. The last prophet of the classical prophets was Malachi. So you have about a 320-year period. You have the prophets prophesying from about 750 down to about 430, about 320 years. That's the span of time covered by these books of the literary prophets. And these prophets were responding to urgent crises in the life of the nation. It's easiest if we think of them as being grouped around four periods of crisis, or four critical periods. First, we have prophets of the Assyrian crisis, right? Remember the fall of Israel in 722, so clustering around that time. We have prophets of the Babylonian crisis. The destruction, of course, there is 586, so we have prophets who cluster around that time, a little bit before. And then you have prophets of the exile, the years that are spent in exile in Babylon, and that's primarily Ezekiel. And then we have prophets of the post-exilic or restoration community, when the Israelites are allowed to come back to restore their community, and we'll see certain prophets there. So in the 8th century, the Assyrian Empire is threatening Israel and Judah. You have two northern prophets, Amos and Hosea. So Amos and Hosea are prophesying in the north. They're warning of this doom. It's going to come as punishment for violations of the Mosaic covenant. Israel fell in 722. You have a similar threat being posed by the Assyrians to the southern kingdom, Judah. And so you have two Judean prophets, Isaiah and Micah. They carry a similar message to the Judeans. So those four we associate with the Assyrian crisis. With the fall of Nineveh, the capital of Assyria, that falls in 612, and that's something that the prophet Nahum celebrates. Then Babylon is the master of the region. Judah becomes a vassal state but tries to rebel. And the prophets Habakkuk and Jeremiah, they prophesy in the southern kingdom, in Judah. Jeremiah, he urges political submission to Babylon because he sees Babylon as the agent of God's just punishment. But we'll come back and look at all these messages in great detail. Post-exilic prophet, or exilic prophet, Ezekiel, as I said, a prophet of the exile who's consoling the people in exile in Babylonia, but also asserting the justice of what has happened. And then finally, at the end of the 6th century, when the first exiles are returning to restore the community, returning to the homeland, they face a very harsh life. And you have Haggai, Zechariah promising a better future. You have prophets like Joel and Malachi who bring some eschatological hope into the mix. So that can help frame, those are the ones we're going to touch on mostly. We're not going to hit all of the prophetic books, but these are the main ones we'll hit.